right, well, thank you everyone for joining us on this very chilly night tonight. I think it's supposed to drop even more tomorrow though, but welcome everyone. If you've been to the museum before, welcome back. If you've never been, welcome in. So my name's Kathleen, I oversee our programming here at the museum. And just thank you again for joining us tonight. Members do get these programs for free, so if you're thinking about being a member, it is a benefit of joining the museum. Just before I introduce our speaker, quick housekeeping. Restrooms are down the hall towards the exit sign if you need restrooms tonight. And drinking fountains are also down that hallway. If you need anything, please feel free to grab me or Deb. We are happy to help you tonight. And Deb is just out in the hallway. So, well, welcome Ed. Thank you for presenting for us tonight. So Ed Seelever is a senior reporter with the Denver Business Journal by day, an explorer of breweries, hikes, and local history by nights and weekends. He's written 2 books on Colorado beer and travel, and his Colorado Excursions with History, Hikes, and Hops was a finalist for the Colorado Book Awards in the general nonfiction category. Tonight he will discuss his finds and why travel is important in today's world, especially post-pandemic. So thank you, Ed, and I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you all for coming. I must admit, I've given a lot of these presentations, but this is the first time I've done it since the pandemic, so I'm pretty excited to be back out and talking about travel and talking to people who I assume, if you have shown up tonight, really love travel too. So I've titled my, when Kathleen asked me to come up with a title, I came up with Drinking In and Drinking Your Way Through Colorado's History and Beauty. And I will explain why as this goes along, but this presentation is based on the 2016 book that you referenced, Colorado Excursions with History, Hikes, and Hops. And what Colorado Excursions with History, Hikes, and Hops is a 30-day guide to traveling the state, stopping each day at one historic site, one natural site, and one drinking site, or what I like to say is the best that Colorado has to offer. And I want to go through what I found, what I think others can find when they travel this wonderful state, and why it is so important today. But I want to start out just by reading one of my 400-word chapters here to give you a sense of the things that I have loved to find in the state. And I want to read the chapter about Three Barrel Brewing in Del Norte, Colorado. When people drop in to Three Barrel Brewing, owner John Bricker asked if they'd like a pizza with their beer. It's a far cry from the brewery's early days when he'd inquire whether they wanted to renew their home insurance policy while they were drinking in his office. In a town that has more buffalo herds, 2, than stoplights, 1, you do some unusual things to grow a brewery. For Bricker, that meant making beer in a space in the back of his insurance office for 8 years after opening in 2005. He eventually put in a bar next door to the agency before going for broke and establishing a 62-seat pizza restaurant in November of 2014. Travelers heading west from Alamosa or east from Durango and Pagosa Springs along Highway 160 make up most of the customers for Three Barrel, as Del Norte's population totals out at fewer than 1,700 people. And its 2 best sellers, Trashy Blonde and Hop Trash IPA, are the kinds of relatable ales that motorists of all sorts can enjoy over lunch or dinner. But the success of Three Barrel, which has outgrown its originally appropriate name and now brews on a 15-barrel system, is linked more to the sour, barrel-aged offerings that Bricker dreams up, ranging from classically Brettanomyces fermented tart beers to experiments that use the likes of Asian pepper or beet sugar. These are sought after in liquor stores and beer bars around the state, and they have ensured that what was once a pseudo-secret brewery has become more well-known than its hometown. Bricker is a herald for the San Luis Valley, however, a humble man who embraces and seeks to promote his home area as the reputation of Three Barrel grows. Barley that is grown and malted nearby is a key ingredient, and the brewery's labels, heavy with images of early area settlers, are done by a local artist. And the question-evoking names of the beers often relate to local stories as well, from the Dilly incident, an adventure of a local buffalo-rearing family, to Bad Phil, which is named for a neighbor's surly rooster. Del Norte may be a spell away from pretty much everywhere. It's 30 miles northwest of Alamosa, but living and brewing there offers an advantageous lifestyle that compelled Bricker's daughter and son-in-law to leave Denver jobs to help him run his business. And I quote, "We want to grow about to the point where it's starting to not be fun as much as it is work. And then we want to plateau, said Will Kreutzer, that son-in-law. We're just having fun. These are the kind of things that I love to find when I travel across the States. I love to remember. John, who's there on the left, is one of the most genuine human beings in the brewing industry, an industry that I've actually covered now for 19 years for a number of papers and books that I've written. And there you see him back in 2015 when I traveled the state with my wife and then 11-month-old son to write this book and to catch back up to him. He's the kind of guy that when we went through again this summer, made sure to tell me to stop by as he really wanted to meet my now 8-year-old son and my 6-year-old daughter who are sitting in the back with us tonight. Three Barrel is just one of the stories that I've loved to find here, but I think before I start getting into these, most people ask, okay, so who the heck are you? I grew up in Maryland, went to school in Chicago, worked for papers in Arkansas and South Carolina, and in 2000 finally had the chance to get out here to Colorado. I started at the Colorado Springs Gazette, and I immediately took to the outdoors in a way that I had never taken to the outdoors in my life before. I found Pikes Peak, I found the hikes around the Colorado Springs area, and I knew within a matter of weeks I wasn't leaving. Luckily, there were many good reasons for me to stay even beyond my career, such as an old college flame of mine, who I'd lost a little touch with, but who I got back together with and married here in 2006. I'm treading on that now for my Colorado reputation. I'm not a native, but I'm married to one, so I think there's something that goes along with that. And I kept writing while I was here too. In fact, I've been a government and political reporter by nature all of my career. But in 2003, I went to the entertainment editor at the Gazette, and I said, you know what, we have a wine column. Why on earth don't we have a beer column? And she said, okay, do it. And so I did. I started writing my column, Beer Run, for the Gazette. Kept at it for a number of years. Kept at it until I left the Gazette in 2008 to go work for the Rocky Mountain News, which I told my wife was going to be the last job I would ever take. Yeah, I always know this is a good crowd when I get a or a laugh line with that one. Showed up to the Rocky in July of 2008 to head their legislative bureau. 5 months later, the owners, for those who may not know it, came in and said, guess what, we're going to sell you, which we all knew in the middle of the Great Recession meant we're closing you, and in February, the 150-year-old paper closed for good. In the middle of that time, I had to scramble and think about what I want to do with my future. As Kathleen mentioned, I landed in March of 2009 at the Denver Business Journal, where I've been for 13 years now. But of the things that kept going through my mind, I said, well, maybe I need to write a beer book. And I had people encourage me. And that led to the 2011 book, Mountain Brew, A Guide to Colorado's Breweries. A book that I like to say, like all great pieces of literature, was inspired by the twin muses of desperation and inebriation. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And I literally thought of this idea while I was at a beer festival in late 2008 and had friends around me encourage me, as people always do when you've been drinking beer for a while. So I toured the state. I visited what were then all 101 breweries that were open in the state as of May 1st, 2011. There's about 430 that are open right now. So the book, while the book is on sale here, I will tell you it's skosh bit out of date. And then I figured, well, where can I go from there? The picture in the upper right there is my extremely short-lived show, Colorado Brews. Has anybody seen that? Okay, good. I knew if anybody other than Denise raised her hand, you were going to be a liar. That show ran for one pilot episode on Rocky Mountain PBS. Apparently they liked it enough where they told me and my producer, go for it. You can make a whole season for us. And we did. We filmed 13 episodes after that, exploring Colorado breweries and talking about the local culture in the cities we went to and the brewing culture of the state. And then my producer went out to find sponsors for the show. And he kept looking for sponsors, and he kept looking for sponsors, and eventually he stopped answering my emails. And so somewhere in a vault, there are 13 hopefully edited but never shown episodes. But that show is not coming back. And so After that went away, I thought, okay, what more could I do to really promote the state and do what I love? And what came about, it's not that, was what I consider a love letter to Colorado. That's the book that I described to you briefly here, Colorado Excursions with History, Hikes, and Hops. And it took the three things I love most: local history, drinking beer or other local spirits, getting out and hiking and being in nature. And I realized that not everybody loves all three of those things, but I figured I could hit on 2 out of 3 for most people. And so then we had to decide where we go. And while we had a little one with us, we also learned as I was planning this book that we were bringing along a fourth traveler, my daughter Jane, who's sitting back there in the chef's hat, and realized, okay, we've got to make this a one summer excursion now. What can we get out and see across the state? And so we set up a map of the state in our basement, figured out all the options there. In case nobody recognizes the map, it is the Beer Drinker's Guide to Colorado, because that's the kind of maps we have in our house, and figured out what we could do. And there's a couple ways I like to look at this book and at travels in general when I think about this. One is that the book has a lot of, it has places you know, it has places you don't know, the places you don't expect watering holes to be, the places where you can drink with your entire family comfortably, and then what I like to say, the places that become your own. It started out with the idea of the no-duh locations. You know, if you're going to travel Colorado, you're going to go travel to Mesa Verde. It is my favorite place in the state of Colorado. I made sure to include not just the national park, where you can imbue yourself in the mystery and the history of the location, but also the Knife's Edge Trail. This is one of my favorite trails. It's a 2-mile in and out and back trail in the northwest corner of the park, where you walk along and find all of the plants that the ancestral Puebloans used for medicine, for spice, for building their houses. It's really an educational thing, and I thought I can combine those two and remind people that while you're there, you also need to stop at Ska Brewing. For those who've never been to Ska Brewing, this is a location in Durango, started by 2 guys from Wheat Ridge who stole their father's home brewing book when they were in high school because they figured they could get drunk cheap. And what they've turned it into is one of the largest businesses in Durango now, distributes in about 7 states across the country, has, as you can tell by that board, a ton of opportunities there, and welcomes families as well. One of the little finds there that I love to talk about. I also like to have no-duh locations like Rocky Mountain National Park. Of course, if you're going to come to Colorado, you're going to go to Rocky Mountain National Park. And I don't hide the fact that I'm going to send people up the trail to Nymph Lake and Emerald Lake and just some of the simplest and most beautiful places you can find in Colorado. But while you're doing that, I'm going to make sure, too, that you stop at the original Oskar Blues. I think by now Oskar Blues is kind of a household name. It has grown into one of the 10 largest craft breweries in America. But I don't think a lot of people know the story that it was started back by Dale Catechis when he decided to open that little strip mall restaurant in 1997 to serve Cajun food, to have blues music played downstairs. And 2 years later, a customer convinced him to try making beer for this as well. The great story about Oskar Blues, and its beer is worthwhile and wonderful, but it was that Dale got a flyer in 2002 from a Canadian canning company, and they said, "How would you like to can your craft beer?" And the whole staff had a fantastic laugh about this, because at the time, the only beer that was canned in America was that which you find in, it's not your highest level of beer. Canned beer was seen as a rot gut excuse as compared to the bottled and higher end craft beer. But Dale, after he got done laughing about this offer, said, well, wait a minute, canning will actually stop light from getting to beer. It's easier to take with you on hikes throughout the state, and Dale is a serious mountain biker, so he was always looking for something he could put in his backpack. Started canning Oskar Blues. Once people stopped laughing, they all started imitating him, and you'd have a hard time finding a lot of craft beer that is now bottled in the the market. He's built it into a national empire. Some may know that Oskar Blues Brewery sold earlier this year to Monster Beverages, but the little trick in it is that Dale had to separate his 4 restaurants from the brewing company a decade and a half ago because of Colorado law. And so if you go into the original Oskar Blues, or for that matter, the one in downtown Denver, downtown Longmont, or downtown Colorado Springs, you just might find him working the kitchen in there as he's kind of gotten back to his roots, celebrating Colorado beer. And if you don't stop there, when you're coming out of Rocky Mountain National Park, don't worry, there's only 3 other options in Estes Park alone to stop and drink at. Right? And sometimes with the book, the no-doubt locations were, frankly, breweries themselves. Odell Brewing, I think, is a place that most people will tell you they're going to stop if they're coming to this state to drink beer. And I thought that's fantastic. I don't need to tell a lot of story about Doug Odell, who founded the brewery in 1989. It's really one of the 5 oldest craft breweries in the state of Colorado, because so many people tend to know about it. But in this case, I said, well, if you're going to see the beer beauty of the state, where else do you find beauty? And I was able to find a lovely trail north of Fort Collins called Mount Margaret. And this is a trail I love particularly because it's about the only 8-mile round trip hike that you're going to do, where you're going to start out at a higher elevation than you're going to end at the summit of the trail. It goes downhill a little bit. It overlooks that beautiful valley, as you can see there in the picture. And it's a trail that has literally a sign that says, at one point, humans this way, stock this way. And I laughed at that right until I saw that cow staring at me and realized, yes, there really is stock that still takes that sign seriously. So whether you're looking for the history and the beauty and you want the beer, or you're looking for the beer and you want the history and the beauty, that's when I realized all of this could go together so well. So then you ask yourself, why do we travel? What can you learn when you travel? And why do you want to incorporate finding the local watering holes into this beauty? Well, you travel to discover. At least I do. I want to find someplace new. I want to find someplace I've never gone. That was one of my goals with the book. Is there were a lot of places in this book that I had never been to before I decided to find out about them and write about them. You want to be a part of something new. You want to try something special out there and see what it's like to step into a different part of the world or a different part of the state just for a little while. And you want to feel like we've lived differently, even just for an instant, and try something new that's out there, not too far from you in our state. So I found the places that I call the hidden gems, like the Alfred Packer Massacre Trail. Not a lot of places in America where you can go and search of a cannibal and find the kind of beauty that you find out in Hinsdale County. Hinsdale County, by the way, or I should say Lake City, the quote-unquote large city in Hinsdale County, it's a population of about 280 people, is the most remote city in the lower 48 states. And for those who may not be familiar with Alfred Packer, he was a trail guide of very little repute who decided to take a party of 6 across the mountains in the winter in 1884. And when they got lost on the Uncompahgre Plateau, depending on whose story you believe, either was attacked, killed them all, and then ate them to survive, or just went straight to the killing them and eating them to survive. You can relive Packer's trial now in the town. The local courthouse has a great story about him, including written on its walls, the history of the Alfred Packer trial. The local Hinsdale County Museum has things like the shackles that he wore in jail. And when you're done, assuming you're hungry, which is, I realize, kind of odd when you're talking about a cannibal, you could still go down to the Packer Saloon and Cannibal Grill. And I love this place because it actually had a pretty decent beer selection when we were there in the summer of 2015, which is pretty rare, again, to find in a remote city of 280 people. It has pork shanks in case you really want to feel your inner Packer, and you'll be inspired to eat your son if needed. But the crazy thing about Lake City, as remote as it is, it now has its own brewery as well. This is a city that actually is largely not open throughout the winter. In fact, I went back to just make sure that this place was still open, and the site says, yes, we're still open, we're just closed for the winter. But that's the kind of place you can still find a brewery, or in this case, a wonderful little local restaurant that had a good beer selection. I like to find the hidden gems too. In the brewing scene, Walter's Brewery in Pueblo was a place that I barely knew existed when I started writing this book, which I'm a little embarrassed to say since I'm a beer writer. And I should mention that while I don't write a column anymore, I still do cover the beer industry for the Denver Business Journal, so I try to keep up with things. When I found Walter's Brewery, it was after a night of unsuccessfully looking for that signature bar that had a good beer selection in Pueblo, and someone said, go try the local brewery here. And you go in through this building, which, that's not the world's greatest photo, but it really shows kind of how dark the building looks. And when you go in the building, you have to wander through a hallway and take a left and wander through another hallway. It's really like going into a speakeasy until you stumble your way into the brewery and the owner meets and greets you. And it is a wonderful little experience. It's actually an old 1883 brewery that operated and that brought beer down to the railroad tracks to workers when they were getting off. Just brought them down, because that's how you attracted people into your bars back in those days. Was revived again in 2014 and now sells a fantastic chili beer. It's got wonderful lagers, and it's really a wonderful example of renewing a town and how you could bring back traditions and let them speak to today. So those are the hidden gems you can find when you're looking for beer. Sometimes I find that I have hidden gems in the book that are no longer hidden gems. This was one of my favorites. When I started giving this presentation, I would put this picture up and say, yeah, a lot of people say, that looks great, Ed. Thanks for sending me out here. Because a lot of people in 2016 didn't know about Deerfield. Deerfield was a wonderful location. It was an African-American farming community that was started in 1910 to escape the prejudice of Denver back in those days. And it attracted a good number of people who were willing to move up from the city to this. And this is about 25 miles east of Greeley. To this area and try their hand at dryland farming. Now, like much of the things that you will hear about that opened up in the 1910 era, it experienced an incredible decade. For the first decade it was open. Two reasons: the 1910s were one of the wettest decades in Colorado history, and when World War I came along, crop prices went through the roof, and people thought the good times would never end. So they invested in their farms, they doubled down on their mortgages and their debts for it. 1920s come along, the crop prices fall through the floor because we no longer need them to feed the U.S. Army overseas, and the weather returns to a much more normal pattern. And then we hit the 1930s and the Great Depression and Dust Bowl, and we see not just communities like this, but a lot of Eastern Plains communities, smaller farming communities, dry up and wither away. Sadly, this did too. But one of the great things about Deerfield is that now it is being preserved. The Museum of the Black American West and the University of Northern Colorado, both very involved in this. It recently started on its road through Congress to become a National Historic Site as well. And what you'll see in the future is some more reproduction buildings go up. These are the original buildings from the 1910s that are still left there, albeit a bit dilapidated. But the kind of things that you can find when you look hard enough as you travel the state. But you came here to hear about beer in some ways. So I wanted to point out that you can discover watering holes even in the places you didn't think you could. That's what I learned in writing this book. For example, you can go down to Bent's Old Fort. Everybody loves Bent's Old Fort, right? In La Junta, it is, oh, thank you, Lincoln. For those who aren't familiar with it, it was a fort built in 1833, right along the Santa Fe Trail. It was meant for a place of refuge for people who were traveling from St. Louis down to Santa Fe to trade. It was actually a wonderful spot of convergence. The Colorado History Museum has a great exhibit on it where it explained that even in a time in the 1830s and 1840s when America, not really known for its race relations then, this was a spot that welcomed in white travelers. It welcomed in the Mexican laborers because this was right on the border with Mexico at the time. And it welcomed in the Arapaho and Cheyenne tribes from the area who would come and trade their pelts as well. It was burned down in 1849, 3 years after the Army came in and took it over during the Mexican War, driving out the Mexican laborers and the and the Cheyenne and Arapaho traders. And William Betts, the founder, thought his dream had gone up in smoke. But luckily, it was rebuilt in the 1970s after someone about 20 years earlier had found a diary of a traveler from the 1840s that had sketched out everything it looked like. That's a long way of saying, oh, wait, there couldn't possibly be a watering hole around the Hunter, right? Well, I had to go to Lamar, but I still found the Buzzard's Roost. And if you can see, you've got some Odell here, you've got some Fat Tire, you've got a couple of craft beers, which may not sound like a lot, but trust me, when you're in Lamar, it is. And the owners, who were nice enough to show me around, explained that they even get lucky because bands traveling from West Texas up to Denver sometimes just stop there and play for the night. These are the kind of places you can find when you're enjoying the beauty of the state. Similarly, if you happen to be going to the Old Homestead House Museum, because I know a lot of people are looking for the only former bordello in Colorado that is now a museum, this one's in Cripple Creek, then you can go just up the street as well and find the Boiler Room. This is in the Hotel St. Nicholas's basement. It's really 5 seats right there. There's also 2 tables that don't appear in that picture. But the cool part about this is it is tucked away in the basement of this old hotel that is terribly haunted. Apparently if you sit in the Boiler Room long enough some nights, you're going to hear the creaking of the pipes and you're going to see the illusions that make it seem like there are ghosts around you or that there are ghosts around you. And it's one of those places that you literally have to, I think most people go to Cripple Creek, go there and they gamble on the main street. If you can just walk up 3 blocks, and when I say up, I really mean up. It's straight uphill. You find a place like this and can really escape into history while you're enjoying your drinking as well. Or there are places that are drinking adventures for the whole family. And I mention this because when I wrote the book, one of my goals was to make this something that every traveler could do. Not just in terms of the drinking adventures, but in terms of where you're going to go to. I only send people up 114 or here, and you can take the Pikes Peak Cog Railway to get up it in the book. But I thought, well, can I really take my family with me if I'm going to go here? Yeah, one of my favorite places is up in the Aspen area, going to see Maroon Bells, take a photo, the most photographed peaks in the state, wonderful little hike. And you may think, Aspen, well, I don't want to bring my family to a place in Aspen. Yes, Element 47, one of the most honored wine bars in America, actually, at the hotel, at the Little Nell, is a place that welcomed our 11-month-old to sit by the poolside along with a lot of people who could really easily pass as models if they weren't. And we love the idea that in a state like Colorado, you can bring people out and bring your kids out as well. You can do the same if you're visiting, as I aforementioned, Pikes Peak. Take the Pikes Peak Cog Railway up, hike up. You do that too. Pro tip, if you have never hiked up Pikes Peak before, you can hike up. It's 13 miles. You need the whole day to do it. But you'll get to the visitor center at the top. And both times I've done this, I didn't even have to ask for a ride down. People would look at our party and say, wow, you hiked up? Can I give you a ride down? So it's a full round trip adventure that you can end at Bristol Brewing, and I single out Bristol Brewing in Colorado Springs, not just because its signature beer, Laughing Lab, a Scottish ale that you can see right there, is actually the most award-winning beer in Colorado history. It's taken 10 Great American Beer Festival medals over the years. But because the brewery, which was an early pioneer, it opened in 1994, 20 years later had the chance to move into the Ivy Wild School, an old school in a neighborhood that was losing residents, that closed down, that faced the wrecking ball, and its owner said, no, we're going to take this over. And now you can drink in literally some of the old classrooms. Teachers have gone in there and drank in the classrooms that they taught in. And down the hallway is a community center. There is a coffee shop. It's a place for the whole community to come in. And a reminder that the places that you can seek to find a good beer, a good wine, a good drink are also the places that help to preserve our community. And then I like to kind of, come in a little bit near the end here with the places that become your own. This one is not one that's people are gonna look at and say, oh, what's that? Mount Falcon Park is well known here in Jefferson County.
But I included in the book because it's my favorite place to hike in all the state of Colorado. And because one thing I found over the years is that I will bring visitors there and they will say, this is exactly what I was looking for. Not a national park, not Red Rocks, although you can clearly oversee Red Rocks there. But when you take them through John Brisbane Walker's castle's remains, you take them to the former spots, or the once planned spot of the White House of the West, an area where children were collecting their pennies so we could build a White House respite for presidents to come and stay in when they come to the West. Back in 1916, and after they got derailed by World War I. It's the kind of place that you need to get out and show people and really make your own like that. And 7 years later, after this book was researched, and that's my little guy on my back there at the Black Canyon of the Gunnison when he's 11 months old, I think it's still just as important, if not more important, to travel. That's him this summer when we were at Black Canyon of the Gunnison. Why is it more important to travel? Because we lost time. We lost the chance to get out. We lost the chance to commute with nature and the chance to be with each other during the pandemic. And now to get back out and see it is more important. This summer I got a chance to take my family on a trip to 6 national parks in 12 days, 6 national parks and monuments around the state of Colorado. They got to be junior rangers. We got to take them down into Mesa Verde and to hike around, and we still got to go drinking along the way. Because yes, you can visit Great Sand Dunes National Park. And this is one of my favorite spaces. If you haven't been to Great Sand Dunes before, the joy of climbing the sand dunes is unlike most things that you will ever do. I like to highlight and I apologize, I apparently forgot to mark my exact place in the book where I have this. I like to highlight how much it is a true joy to climb up the sand dunes, but more importantly, to get down the sand dunes. We rode down on mats this year. We rolled down the sand dunes because that's the way to do it. And to get out and see a place like this in our own state, the largest sand dunes in America, is something that's a true joy. And then to go find a place like what they have in downtown Alamosa, a small town that has one of my favorite places to go drink and enjoy, the Ruby Slipper. This isn't noted for its beer quite so much. It's not a bad beer selection. It's got 32 kinds of burgers on the menu. Lincoln there is staring at one that's got mac and cheese piled on top of it. Or to go into downtown Alamosa, where we have 2 breweries within 3 doors of each other. Not 3 blocks. Brewery, laundromat, brewery. One of them is Square Pegs Brew Works, which has won JBF awards for its beer. 2 doors down from that I didn't feature here was San Luis Valley Brewing, an old school brewery with a big restaurant as well. But to find places like that when you're exploring is a true joy to me. Or to say, go to the aforementioned Black Canyon and see the beauty there and see the canyon that is the greatest combination of steepness, depth, and just staring down like the world is disappearing under you. And then to go to a place like Horsefly Brewing right in town. This was a brewery in downtown Montrose, Montrose's first brewery, founded by a police officer in town, though we kind of kept that side gig quiet, and now very welcoming to kids if you want to sit on, say, a horse rear chair, doing a variety of beers. I believe they had 14 on the menu the last time we were there, and welcoming in people who are coming from across the state to visit the area. Even if you're kind of crossing the border, if you haven't been to Dinosaur National Monument before, it is really an awe-inspiring sight. Not only do they have fossils that you can touch in a wall that, these are not the fossils where you may see a track here or there, they actually preserved the wall of fossils after they get done inspecting all of them, so you can see what it looks like as people are digging through these things 90 years ago and finding these incredible bones. But they also have an incredible amount of rock art from the Fremont people, people who were about the same time as the Anasazis, or what we now call the native, the ancestral Puebloans. and you could just wonder, what does the rock art mean? I've actually been reading a book on this now, and it's quite incredible to think about what civilizations were trying to tell us before. And then you can go into a place like Vernal Brewing. Even small towns in Utah have adopted the Colorado motto, putting a brewery everywhere you go, and have a family welcoming to you there. Although I do love that Utah's brewing laws are a little bit different than ours, and as the waitress told us, there were two kinds of beer, the beer that's 4% ABV and under, and then the beer that's more than that. And if you buy the beer that's more than that to go, you have to leave out the back door of the brewery, because that shows you're coming from the brewery and not from the restaurant. So every time you're in Colorado, just getting a simple beer transaction, be very thankful for our laws. And finally, I like to close with this: the places you'll never forget. I don't know if anyone here has been to Zapata Falls before. I see they have. This was my favorite discovery of the entire book. In fact, I had been on my own. I'm not gonna bring the 6-month pregnant woman with me to to climb the sand dunes. So I go on my own one morning, and I read a little bit about Zapata Falls, and I thought, okay, is this worth it? And if you are exploring Zapata Falls, the trick is that you're going to go down this trail, and it's really just a half-mile long, and you're going to think for the first 3/10 of that mile, what on earth am I doing? It is dry, it is dusty, there's very little to look at, and then you emerge into this, and I want to kind of finish up. I tried in this chapter to capture what it was like. Stroll up the creek, climbing treacherously over a few wet rocks as you hold on to cliff walls and you land smack in the middle of a cave. To get there, you must cross the stream, you must soak your feet, and embracing this is part of the experience. But the true laugh at where you are in amazement moment comes when you teeter over a few more rocks inside the crevasse and find yourself no more than 15 feet away from a 30-foot waterfall streaming through the glacier-cut chasm. And that's the waterfall. That's my photo. That's not a professional, and I don't have a telephoto lens. I got that close. The roar is yell at the person next to you deafening, and you must cling to the sides of the grotto to navigate the best view. Some people stare in amazement, while others climb up the cave walls and into the falls, ascending to a rock ledge 1/3 of the way up. So you can actually climb into that as well. Many people come in to snap a photo and leave. A better experience, however, is staying here for a while and soaking it in, possibly even as you dance in the pool at the bottom of the falls. Watch the people around you as they enjoy this and look up every once in a while in realization of what you found, like you've discovered a secret world far removed from the forest. The towering rock formation is beautifully rough, and the water is quite calming once it's deposited in the pool. There's really nothing else like this. And I mention that because this year I took my family to the Great Sand Dunes. My wife remembered how much I had loved this and said, we're exhausted, but we want to do this hike. And the kids were grumpy, understandably. After a morning on the dunes, they were tired, and then they saw this same grotto. And to see the looks of amazement on their faces as they climbed through, and they posed for their own picture by the falls, reminded me why we do this, why we get out there, why we hike, why we explore, why we try to find the past, and why we try to find a great local location to sit down and enjoy a beer or a hot chocolate or anything you want afterwards. Travel still is that important to us, and I think if there's any chance to get out and encourage people to find the beauty of the state and to find your own road beyond the ones I found even, that's what I like to do with a presentation like this. And that is the story of Colorado Excursions with History, Hikes, and Hops. So that said, I love talking about this. So does anyone have any questions or suggestions? Yes.
Have you ever been to Rangeley?
I have No, I don't think I have. I'm sorry. I was about to say yes, but I was thinking of a different town. No, tell me about
Well, I
Rangeley.
haven't either, but
Okay.
my great grandparents had a little watering hole there, and I was just curious what it looked like now because you can barely find it on the map. But yeah, they had a watering hole attached to an ice cream shop back in the 20s and 30s. So just curious if it still existed, if I should show up and say, hey, I'm one of these people, or whatever. But
It's possible. I mean, it's very likely the building still exists. It's a wonderful thing going through all of the small downtowns in Colorado is you will find that if business doesn't exist, you can still see what it was. But there are a lot of things out there that still exist. I mean, some of the things that I highlighted were like, the Buckhorn Exchange, even here in town, has the first liquor license in the state of Colorado. Not because it's the oldest, but because that was where it came from. You go to a place like Leadville and find the Silver Dollar Saloon, which has been operating since the days when it probably shouldn't have been operating. And you go to locations across the state, and you're going to find that. So I'm sorry, I have not been to Rangeley,
it's
but
okay.
no,
I
but those old bars and those old restaurants are the ones that are still tucked away and still have these memories.
And combo things, you could get gas, you could stay at a hotel, you can have ice cream, you can gamble, do all the things, so.
Back in the days when it was more kind of a Swiss Army knife of everything you
Exactly.
needed. Yes. But yes.
Did you just go to like these faraway places, or did you do things here in the Denver metro area? And have you done one in Golden?
I have. I did do things in the Denver metro area. I kind of redid this presentation because I figured you all know those. But yeah, no, Golden is featured in the book. I feature Buffalo Bills because I think it's one of the more interesting historical sites. To imagine why it is here and to celebrate somebody who I think is known by name but not by actual personality. I also feature Golden Gate State Park, Golden Gate Canyon, and have a particular trail I love where you're just basically going straight downhill, rounding the corner, coming straight back up and overlooking the entire valley. So between those and between Mount Falcon, I've got a couple of things here in Jefferson County. But no, I mean, just I'll give you a couple of things that I've got just in the Denver area to give a little sense of it. For example, I include the Molly Brown House because I think that Molly Brown is also a character whose name is known and story isn't, and I think it's a great place for people to go and learn about that. I try to send people down to Confluence Park and actually dip their feet in the water down there in downtown Denver to see what that is like. One of my favorite hikes, although I understand you can't go up to the top anymore, is Devil's Head Lookout, where you could go up and actually see one of the last fire stations, not fire as in a fire truck in it, but one of the places where you would go out and look over the valley from a high station to see if any fire was burning, and then convey that down to the foot below so you could get on it quickly. So yeah, I mean, I've got more than that too, but those are the kind of places around Denver I try to send people to. And in fact, when trying to decide what would be a good historical location in Denver, I settled on Molly Brown, I settled on History Colorado Museum, but I also decided to design my own walking tour of downtown Denver. Because I think that's part of the joy of going down there and just seeing everything and taking in and trying to imagine what the city was like both before the fire burned it down in 1864, which is one of the greatest things that ever happened because then we learned to build with brick, and now most of those buildings from the 19th century are still there and still alive in their own way. But yes, I do. I spend... I've got the book organized into 10 3-day trips. I actually pitched this to my editor, and this is the same company that I wrote my first book to. And I said, I want it to be a 30-day trip. And he said, it's not 1910. Nobody takes 30-day trips anymore. And so I said, okay, I can do 3 10-day trips for the people who just want to get out and do it. But But I've got one that just is here in Denver. I've got one that goes around the Denver area. I've got one that goes from Fort Collins to Estes Park, and then get out to other parts of the state as well. But yeah, so try to highlight Denver and a few places in Jefferson County as well. Yes, ma'am.
Are all the places in your presentation in the book?
Yes, all except for out at Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. I did not put that in the book. And I think one of the bars in downtown Alamosa is not listed in here. But yeah, no, I tried to stick to it because I love to.
I was like, do I need to write them down?
No. You don't need to write it down. And the great thing about this is there are 95 total places here. I cheated, and sometimes I'd send people to 2 places or even 3 places for one of these categories in a day. But of the 95, 93 of them are still open. 2 of the bars have closed down, unfortunately. But it's a great deal different than my first brewery book, which I have 101 places in there, and I think about a quarter of them are gone by now, and some have moved and whatnot. That's just 11 years later. But I picked places that have staying power, and that some may be closed for the season, but that are all still open almost. Yes.
I'm kind of curious how you think the pandemic affected the brewing industry. Do you think it had a big effect, or was it able to have that staying power? Because obviously people were still wanting to go out to the store and buy the beer and things like that.
The brewing industry got through the early years of the pandemic much better than most people expected. There was a lot of fear that breweries were going to close by the dozens in this state because the Colorado brewing model, at least for about the last 5 to 6 years before the pandemic, had been built not on distribution. In fact, about 2015, American beer drinkers really changed the way they bought beer. Instead of buying national brands across the country, there was such an influx of local breweries that everyone turned to their local breweries to buy. So, I mean, the big brands that we know from this state, Avery, Breckenridge, New Belgium, Great Divide, also these massive declines in out-of-state sales. And so even they started reverting back to, let's bring people into the tap room, and that's how breweries grew. And you had a lot of breweries that had never even thought about putting beer in a can before, and they did all their business across the tap room, and it was a wonderful time. And then the pandemic hits, and nobody can go into a tap room. So breweries did an amazing pivot in that, one, they survived off the goodwill of their customers, and I don't know if anybody else had habits like I did, but what I would do early on in the pandemic is I would go out about once every 2 weeks or so, or more often if Denise didn't see me sneaking out, and I would go down to one of the local breweries, and I knew I'd find the owner there because they had to lay off basically everyone on their staff other than their owner and their brewmaster, and I would buy $70, $100 worth of beer at that place to just try to keep them going. And also because it was frankly the only socialization I had at the time. While they're sitting there and they're filling crowlers for you, you can talk to the person across the bar, and they're eager to do it too. But the breweries pivoted at that time. They started bringing in their own canning machines, and they started bringing in crowler machines. For those who aren't familiar, that is filling a giant 32-ounce can there that you drink in one setting. But those became really big, and in fact, a lot of breweries were still serving 15, 16 beers on tap at a time because people would come in and they would fill those crowlers and they would take them home. And breweries did very well. I mean, I think between I and the other beer writers in town, we only picked out about 20 breweries along the Front Range that closed in that first year of the pandemic, and it was really shocking to see how low it is. The good times aren't as good as they used to be for breweries, though. I think people are resetting their expectations now, and it's just a story that I wrote last week that was hard for me to write was the closing of Epic Brewing in Rhino. Epic is actually it's a Salt Lake founded brewery, but it decided to open a second place in Denver and use it for all of its distribution east of Colorado. And it had a great lively tap room when it opened in 2013, and people stopped in. It really became a part of the local community. And the owner said just people didn't come back after the pandemic, and that was because people used to, and felt bad when he said this. I'm like, this is literally me. The people used to go by for happy hour. And they used to meet their friends there, and then they would go home because maybe they were working downtown, or maybe they were working in Rhino, and it was a great middle ground there. And people don't work downtown anymore. We're 56% of the people that used to work downtown are going into their office these days. And he said, I couldn't survive anymore. Not only that, but with freight costs being so high, you can't ship beer to the East Coast like you used to either. So I think we're going to see some rough days for breweries coming up. So I would advise if you have those favorite breweries, make sure to stop in every once in a while before you suddenly make the call and find out, hey, I appreciate what you've done, but we're closing in December because we can't do this anymore. So, yes.
So, what are the 5 oldest, and out of the 5 oldest, what's your favorite?
The 5 oldest.
And then I have a second one.
Okay, all right. That's it. See, I don't have that in the book, so now you're really taxing me here. But
I'm just curious your thoughts on them.
No. It's okay. If you're talking about just the 5 continuously most oldest continuously operating breweries, you've got Coors, of course, which opened in 1873. Depending on how you define whether it's still operating, you got Boulder Beer, which has shut down its tap room and is now being brewed by Sleeping Giant Brew, which is a contract brewery, and that's all you can find for Boulder Beer now. But the brand is still out there. And then you've got the 2 brew pubs that opened in the fall of 1988 after the state changed its law to allow brew pubs to operate. One of those is Wind Coop downtown. The other of those is in Durango. Sorry. And I'm struggling with the name right now. But there's one in downtown Durango. And I may be wrong, but I think Odell is actually the 5th oldest brewery in the state, unless you're going to count Rock Bottom. But I think that even opened the first Rock Bottom in '91. So I think those are the oldest. Now you've got breweries that have come back to life. I mentioned Walters there. It's an 1883 brewery that sprung back to life. You actually have Tivoli downtown. That was an 1859 brewery. Technically, that started a decade and a half before Coors. It operated until 1969 on what's now the Auraria campus downtown, before finally shutting down, being one of the last local breweries to succumb to a culture that was really going national at that point. And it reopened about 10 years ago. So that's a classic brewery that's come back. So it depends on how you define what is kind of Carver. Thank you. Carver is the brewery in Durango that actually is the 1988 brew pub there. So it depends how you define what's the oldest. But look, I still like going down to Wind Coop, quite frankly. It feels different in a place like that. It was for those who have moved, like I have moved to this state in the last 2 decades. People are shocked to know that was the dregs down there in 1988 when it opened. In fact, John Hickenlooper, back when he was just a simple brewer and mayor, before he became a brewer senator, told me he could literally at one point see tumbleweeds blowing across that area of town. There's nothing down there. And they open up Wind Coop there. The owner of the building charges them $1 a square foot because they were just glad anybody would come in there. And it starts a sensation where people are like, oh, hey, I can go eat somewhere and drink the local beer. And really, and you'll see remnants of that across Colorado, actually. If you've ever been to Coopersmith's up in Fort Collins, that was the same group. Opened that in the early 90s to revive what was then a pretty dragging downtown Fort Collins. They did the same with Phantom Canyon in downtown Colorado Springs in 1993, at a time when that downtown was suffering as well. So there could be an argument made that breweries have really helped to bring back a number of downtowns here in Colorado. So that was probably a really long answer around where you were going there, but that's a little bit about the old breweries and just.
It's pretty fulfilling. What's your personal between Avery and Odell's?
Which one do I like better between Avery and Odell? I'm an Odell fan. I I like Avery, but I'm definitely an Odell fan, and I love what they're doing with their place at Sloan's Lake now. Just a beautiful place to hang out and get a beer, and that always says half of the beers on the menu are brewed there rather than in Fort Collins. But I am. You didn't quite ask me this, but if I had to pick my favorite though, I'm a Great Divide guy. I think what they've done with their Yeti project and their barrel aging has really kind of brought back an old brewery that was maybe getting a little old, and I love going down there. So
Cool.
Where in Chicago did you go to school? I'm
Uh,
guessing Northwestern.
yes, Thank you, Lincoln. Yes,
Northwestern? Is that where mom and dad met?
I brought him up there for my 25th anniversary last year. So
Awesome.
yeah, so I went to Northwestern. Small beer story there when I was a senior for my mag.
None of mine are small.
What's that?
Only a small beer story, because none of my beer stories at Northwestern are small, and I didn't even go there.
We had to do a final project for my magazine article writing class, and I decided in 1994 I wanted to do it on this growing microbrew industry that nobody had heard about, and so I went down to Goose Island, no longer a craft brewery, but still a very well-known brewery here. And at the time, a college student was able to sit down with its owner for 30 minutes and talk about the brewing industry and how small it was and how frustrated he was how small it was because there were only 3 breweries in Chicago. I believe the city has about 100 something right now. And it spawned my first lifelong love affair with beer. And as I grew over the years, history and being in nature kind of went along with that.
They were dry for a long time, because it was the place with the most churches in the area, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, I went to Evanston, Illinois, the home of Northwestern University. It was also the home of the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
Right.
There were 5 bars in Evanston when I went there. There were now 4 breweries in Evanston. And so I was really excited to visit a couple of those when I went back last year. Well, if nobody has any more questions, thank you for coming out. I hope that this has been somewhat entertaining, but mostly inspiring. And that you will want to get out and see the back roads of this state and the local areas and try out the local watering holes as well. And so I encourage that as much as possible. And if you're interested in buying a book, I'll be selling them and signing them here in the back, and wanting to hang around and just talk beer and history and hiking as well. So thank you for coming here today.
Well, thank you so much for presenting. That was really enjoyable. So I see all the presentations here, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you for presenting, and thank you everyone for joining us. And like he said, there will be books back there, and then we also sell your older book, which you said obviously some of the things are no longer
But it's a good
relevant,
time
but-
capsule, and still some of those are open, yes.
Yes, then we have another beer book as well. So thank you everyone.
Thank you.
You sound like you're from Chicago?